In the frozen quiet of a tiny Alaskan town, everyone believed Anya Petrov, the elderly owner of a humble bookshop, was too fragile to fight back.
Where is it? You better
Three
tell us
thugs
right
thought
now.
she was an easy target. They threatened to burn her shop to the ground, with her still inside. But what they didn't know was that her protector was already on his way home through the snow. Jim Walker, a battle-tested Marine veteran, and Rex, his fiercely loyal German shepherd, were returning to Kasaluk that very night. And when darkness came for Anya, it found out too late that she was never alone. Winter in Kasaluk, a remote Alaskan town pressed against the frozen lip of a vast bay, moved like an ancient creature, slow, heavy, and unyielding. The air was razor cold, thick enough to sting the lungs with every breath, and the wind battered the metal street signs until they rang like distant warning bells. The marina lay imprisoned in white ice, boats locked in place as if frozen mid-thought, while faint ribbons of aurora flickered half-heartedly across the dawn sky. Jim Walker pushed through this hostile morning with the steadiness of someone long accustomed to fighting both weather and memory. Nearly 50, broad-shouldered, and wrapped in a charcoal parka dulled by years of harsh winters, Jim carried the deliberate, quiet confidence of a former Marine who had spent half his life in battlefields before choosing to bury himself in the stillness of Alaska. His jaw, square and dusted with frost-kissed stubble, contrasted with the calm, sharp clarity in his gray-blue eyes that saw everything. Beside him trotted Rex, a 7-year-old German shepherd with a powerful build and a winter-thickened coat of black and sable. His ears were always angled forward, his amber eyes alert and discerning, giving him a presence that felt less like a pet and more like a silent guardian carved from the same wildness as the land. Together, they approached the weather-worn building tucked between a bait shop and a cold-weather gear store, North Star Curios, its wooden sign creaking as if complaining about another day of bitter wind. Inside, warmth blossomed around them in a wave of pine oil, old books, and dried herbs. Shelves stacked with Inuit carvings, antique maps, journals, and relics from forgotten expeditions lined the cozy shop, and at the counter stood Anya Petrov, a widow in her early 60s with silver hair braided neatly over one shoulder. Her pale skin, lightly flushed from the cold, made her amber-colored eyes even more striking. There was a composed gentleness in her posture, shaped by decades of library work in Murmansk and the quiet resilience of someone who had endured both war and migration. "Jim, my boy," she greeted, her Russian accent soft but textured like cracked ice. "The wind looks like it's trying to steal your soul today." Jim removed his gloves with a faint smile. "It tried, but Rex wouldn't let it." Rex let out a short huff of agreement, prompting Anya to chuckle as she poured hot tea from her brass samovar. Jim spent the next hour tightening loose shelves, brushing frost from glass corners, and checking sensors he'd installed to help Anya during storms. Rex wandered between aisles, tail swaying calmly, examining every scent as though cataloging them for later. The peace inside the shop felt delicate, almost sacred, a rare pocket of warmth in a town swallowed by endless winter. But peace in Kasaluk had a habit of being short-lived. Around noon, snow began tapping lightly on the windows. Jim straightened from adjusting a crooked map when the door burst open, slamming hard against its frame as an icy gust tore into the room. Along with the cold came the smell of cigarettes, gasoline, and trouble. 3 men entered. Leading them was Sable, tall and thin with slick black hair combed back so sharply it gleamed under the yellow lights. His steel-gray eyes were flat and calculating, the eyes of a predator accustomed to intimidation. His black, insulated jacket, stained at the sleeves, hinted at a man who didn't care what he ruined, Behind him lumbered Bruin, a thick, broad man with a flattened nose that looked like it had been broken repeatedly. His shaggy brown beard and oversized parka made him resemble a wild bear forced into human clothes, and the sour smell of cheap whiskey clung to him like a fog. The third, Mink, was smaller, wiry, twitchy, eyes darting around the room in quick, nervous sweeps. His camouflage jacket hung loosely from his narrow frame, and his fingers tapped compulsively against his thighs as if he feared the silence. Sable spoke first, voice smooth and dismissive. "Warm place you've got here, ma'am. Shame if something melted it." Jim subtly shifted his stance, his presence instantly growing larger, drawing Rex's attention. Rex lowered his head slightly, gaze locked on the strangers. Anya kept her chin high, though her hands tightened around the counter. "This is a peaceful business," she said calmly. "State why you are here or leave." Sable stepped closer, smiling without warmth. "Protection. Winter's dangerous. Fires happen. Shelves fall. 600 a week keeps you safe." Jim moved between Sable and Anya, his voice quiet but unshakable. "You've said your piece. Now go." Bruin laughed under his breath. Mink twitched nervously, and Sable leaned in until Jim could smell the stale smoke on his breath. "You'll wish you'd listened. Tomorrow night the air gets real dry, perfect for flames." With that, he kicked the base of a display shelf, making it wobble dangerously before turning and walking out with the others. The bell jingled weakly as the door closed behind them, swallowed by the wind. Inside the shop, silence fell again, but it was no longer comforting. Anya's hands trembled as she knelt to pick up fallen postcards. Jim gently steadied her arm. Rex stood at the door, nose pressed to the crack, drawing in the scent of the men as if recording each molecule. Jim said quietly, "They'll be back." And Rex growled, low and certain, confirming what they both already knew. The wind hardened as evening approached Kassaluk, dragging long claws of cold down the narrow streets while the sky dimmed into a bruised twilight. Jim Walker stood outside North Star Curios long after Sable, Bruin, and Mink had vanished into the storm, the brass bell above the door swaying as though echoing their threat. He tightened his worn charcoal parka, breath forming pale clouds that drifted into the haze. Rex stood firm beside him, the 7-year-old German shepherd bracing against the cold, ears sharply angled forward. Even the town seemed tense. Fishermen pulled shutters early, lights dimmed behind frosted windows, and the cold pressed harder against the shop front like a silent warning that trouble would return. Inside the shop, Anya Petrov moved slowly, picking up the postcards scattered during the confrontation. Her slender hands trembled despite her effort to hide it. The lines around her amber eyes deepened with a mix of fear and memory, echoes of a past shaped by hardship in Russia before she came to Alaska. She whispered that she would be fine, but Jim recognized the strain beneath her calm words. He swept up splintered dust from the kicked shelf, each scrape of the broom a reminder that Sable's threat wasn't empty. Their voices might have left the shop, but the shadow they cast remained heavy in the air. Rex paced through the aisles, inhaling deeply at spots where the intruders had stood. His disciplined movements, shaped by years as a trained K9, were methodical and precise. Jim crouched beside him, placing a firm hand on his warm coat. The dog's steady heartbeat grounded him. "We'll be ready," Jim murmured, and Rex answered with a low, thoughtful rumble. Jim stood and examined the shop like a battlefield. The thin back window, the single lock on the rear door, the creaking side entrance that opened toward the snow-filled alley. The shop was a haven, filled with light and artifacts, but fragile against the kind of men who had threatened Anya. Jim decided to strengthen the back entrance first. He fetched a metal bar and screws from the storage room while Anya held the brackets, her silver braid swaying as she leaned forward. Despite her age, she steadied the metal with surprising resolve. "I survived darker places," she murmured, "but I will not bow to men like that." Jim understood. The shop was her last connection to stability after losing her husband. He drilled new holes and secured the reinforced bar, the vibrations humming through the door as if sealing in her resolve. The cold wind outside battered the walls, urging them to prepare faster. He then turned to the front windows. A thin crack near the corner let in a ribbon of icy air. Outside, the street lamps flickered under the wind, creating long amber streaks across the snow. Anya returned with an oil lamp, setting it beside him. Its warm glow softened the room. "My husband believed darkness only wins when we stop tending the light," she said, softly. Jim read the grief beneath her voice, noticing how she wrapped her arms around herself, not just for warmth, but from the fear of losing yet another piece of her life. He nodded, silently promising she would not face this danger alone. Jim walked the shop again, visualizing movement paths as though preparing for an operation. The shelves created natural choke points, narrow passages where an intruder might be funneled. Rex followed closely, his paws silent on the old wooden floor, body angled in alert readiness. Jim mentally marked blind spots and escape routes, shifting a heavy storage crate nearer the counter to act as a makeshift barrier. Anya watched with quiet trust, her amber eyes reflecting both worry and confidence. Jim's instincts, sharpened from years of combat, guided every assessment, every adjustment, every quiet breath as he prepared the shop for the storm he knew was coming. As the night deepened, the wind became harsher. Jim suggested closing early, and though Anya usually kept the shop open until late, she agreed without hesitation. She turned the sign to "closed," her fingers lingering on the glass as if sealing away danger. Jim double-checked the locks, while Rex settled near the counter in a guarded position, front paws stretched forward, eyes fixed on the door. The dog didn't bark. Rex rarely wasted sound, but the tightening of his posture told Jim everything. The storm outside wasn't the only thing prowling the streets. Jim stepped outside briefly into the alley behind the shop. Snow had thickened, falling in muffling layers that swallowed footsteps. Yet he found fresh tracks, large, heavy prints deep in the snow leading toward the woods. They didn't belong to him or any neighbor. Their size suggested Bruin, the heavy-set brute who had kicked the shelf. Jim crouched, brushing the snow lightly. The edges were sharp and untouched by drifting flakes. They were recent. Rex leaned beside him, nose twitching as he took in the scent. Jim read the message clearly. They weren't just planning to return. They were already watching. Back inside, Jim brewed strong tea for Anya, hoping warmth would soften her shaking nerves. She held the cup carefully, but her eyes betrayed her worry. "Will they come tonight?" she asked. Jim shook his head slowly. "They wanted fear to settle. They'll return when they think you've had enough time to doubt yourself." His voice was steady, but inside his instincts buzzed with heightened awareness. Rex sat close to Anya, pressing his shoulder gently against her thigh, grounding her with his presence. The small gesture softened her trembling expression. As the storm roared outside, Jim decided he would not leave the shop overnight. He unrolled a sleeping pad beside the counter, positioning himself where he could hear both the front and back entrances. Rex lay beside him, the dog's warm breath forming faint clouds in the dim lamplight. Anya retired upstairs but kept her doctor open insisting she didn't want to shut herself away completely. Jim listened to the rattling sign outside, the shifting ice on the bay, and Rex's occasional alert huffs. The danger had only stepped into the shadows, not vanished. Jim stared into the dimness, steel settling in his chest. The men would return, and he would be ready. The storm had eased by dawn, but the air carried a metallic sharpness that felt heavier than the snow in Kasseluk. Jim Walker rose from the thin sleeping pad near the counter, his back stiff from the cold floor, while Rex straightened beside him with a low, alert stretch. The shop was still, untouched by trouble during the night, but the silence felt watchful rather than peaceful. Jim moved through the dim interior, boots whispering across wooden boards, and checked the front door. The snow outside revealed no new footprints, just the drifted-over tracks from the day before. He flipped the lights on, casting a warm glow across the shelves. Rex stayed close, ears up, sensing the tension threading through Jim's movements. Jim began checking the security camera system he had installed on a previous winter, long before threats arrived. The set consisted of 2 small, weatherproof cameras, one above the front door disguised as an old wooden ornament and another overlooking the alley, concealed behind a carved Inuit mask. Their LED indicators blinked steadily, reassuringly. Jim adjusted the monitor behind the counter, reviewing last night's footage. Nothing unusual appeared, only the crawling snow, the occasional shifting shadows of loose shingles, and the swirling frost. Still, he zoomed into the alley view, scrutinizing the edges for movement. Rex leaned his head close to the monitor, following the shifting images. The dog's posture, sharp and attentive, mirrored Jim's unspoken worry. Anya Petrov descended from her small upstairs apartment, wrapped in a thick wool robe, her braided silver hair hanging loosely over one shoulder. The fatigue around her amber eyes deepened, hinting she had barely slept. She approached Jim with a tired but determined expression. "Did anything happen?" she asked softly, voice raspy from the cold. Jim shook his head. "Nothing last night. But they're planning something." Anya sighed, her breath slow and heavy. She returned to the counter to warm her hands around a cup of tea she had prepared. Though her frame was slender and her age apparent in the lines etched into her face, her spine remained straight, a quiet resilience shaped by hardship before Alaska became her refuge. Jim moved to the back entrance, where he had reinforced the door hours earlier. The metal bar held firmly. To add another layer of security, he drilled a small hook into the frame and tied a thin fishing line across the threshold, attaching it to an old brass bell he found in one of Anya's antique drawers. When the door shifted even slightly, the bell would ring. It was a simple trap, but sometimes simplicity worked better than complicated systems. Rex sniffed the doorframe again, then sat down beside it, head slightly tilted, as if memorizing every new scent. The dog's disciplined quietness filled the space like a second alarm system. While Jim tightened the line, his phone vibrated. The sound cut through the stillness like a blade. He pulled it from his pocket and frowned at the unknown number. When he opened the message, his breath paused. A video played, high resolution, steady, and unmistakably deliberate. It showed Anya at the frozen market from the previous morning, her wool coat wrapped tight, her hands carefully selecting fish from a vendor's stall. The camera zoomed slowly onto her face, capturing every detail, her silver braid, her careful smile, the lines around her eyes. Then the video panned outward, showing the crowd around her, exposing how vulnerable she was. The final frame cut to black before a message appeared. Alaska swallows those who walk alone. Jim felt cold anger crawl up his spine. He tightened his grip on the phone. Rex let out a low growl, recognizing the shift in Jim's breathing. Anya stepped closer, face pale as she saw the replay over Jim's shoulder. "They filmed me?" Her voice cracked with disbelief. Jim placed a steadying hand on her arm. "It's intimidation. They're watching us." The thought of someone trailing her through the busy market, unnoticed, ignited a deeper fear in Jim than the direct threat from Sable, Bruin, and Mink. This video wasn't the work of petty criminals. It was precise, calculated, someone practiced in surveillance. Jim knew exactly who to call. He stepped away to the corner of the shop and dialed the number for the Cassillook Marshal's office. After 2 rings, a steady, weathered female voice answered. "Marshal Nora Hale speaking." Nora Hale, a woman in her late 40s, had the hardened composure of someone shaped by decades of coastal storms and law enforcement battles. Her short, dark hair, peppered with gray at the temples, framed a strong face with sharp cheekbones and steady, dark eyes. Nora was tall, fit, and carried herself with a quiet authority earned through resilience rather than rank. Jim trusted her more than anyone in town. "Nora, it's Jim Walker," he said. "We've got a serious problem." Nora's tone sharpened instantly. "I figured you'd call after yesterday. I heard whispers." Jim explained everything. The extortion attempt, the destruction in the shop, the threats, the fresh tracks last night, and finally the surveillance video. There was a long silence on the line before Nora exhaled sharply. "Jim, that's not just local trash you're dealing with. Sable works for Victor Chernoff." Even Rex stiffened at the shift in Jim's posture. Anya, listening nearby, clutched the counter tightly. Nora continued, her voice lower. "Victor Chernoff is trouble of a different scale. Early 50s, Russian-Alaskan dual background, 6 feet tall, lean but strong, gray streaks in his black hair, sharp, angular features. He started as a dock worker but rose through smuggling networks like wildfire. He runs half the underground shipments along the coast. Unregistered cargo, illegal chemicals, weapons. He's ruthless, strategic, and never lets disrespect slide." Jim felt the weight of her words sink into his bones. Victor Chernoff wasn't merely dangerous. He was systematic, patient, and violent in quiet ways. Nora added, "Sable, Bruin, Mink. They're small pieces. Chernoff is the one who decides who burns and who disappears. And Jim, if he sent someone to follow Anya at the market, he already considers you involved." Jim clenched his jaw. He knew what that meant. Chernoff didn't send warnings twice. Rex rose to his feet, tail lowered, ears forward, sensing Jim's rising adrenaline. The dog stepped closer, muscles coiled with anticipation. Anya's amber eyes brimmed with fear, but she stayed silent, waiting for Jim's guidance. Jim asked, "Can you protect her?" Nora hesitated. "I'll try, but Chernoff owns people in nearby towns, and he monitors radio chatter. Don't rely on formal channels. Protect yourselves. Keep lights low tonight. Stay inside. And Jim, don't underestimate him." Jim promised he wouldn't. When the call ended, the shop felt colder despite the heater humming. Jim turned to Anya. "We're up against something bigger than we thought." Anya nodded slowly, gripping Rex's fur for strength. The dog stayed beside her with quiet loyalty, ready for whatever came next. The temperature dropped sharply as the night deepened in Cassillook, turning the streets into frozen ribbons of white-blue reflection under the thin moonlight. Inside North Star Curios, the heater hummed softly, casting a gentle warmth that contrasted harshly with the icy wind beating the windows. Jim Walker sat upright beside the counter, eyes half open, boots still on, his worn charcoal parka draped over his lap. Rex lay beside him, the 7-year-old German shepherd breathing slowly, but never fully asleep, ears twitching toward every distant noise. The shop felt tense, as if holding its breath, and Jim sensed the kind of silence military men always recognized before an ambush, the silence that didn't belong to nature. At exactly 1:03 a.m., Rex lifted his head sharply, his ears snapped forward, posture stiffening, muscles tight. Jim immediately rose without a sound, reading every signal in the dog's body. Rex wasn't reacting to wind, nor the settling wood of the shop. This was human presence. Jim stepped toward the stair landing and peered out the window. Far below, across the street, a faint flicker of movement shifted through the swirling snow. Then, the power to the block flickered. Barely a second, but enough for Jim to understand. This was planned. A team was coming, and not amateurs like Sable's crew. Jim motioned to Rex with a silent hand signal, sending the dog toward the shadows behind the counter. A faint metallic click echoed across the shop, the front lock being picked with professional precision. Jim's breaths slowed, his heart calm and controlled. He moved silently behind a tall shelf near the entrance, the position providing full cover and a clean angle toward the door. The latch eased open. 4 men entered as shadows, their movements synchronized. Each wore matte black tactical jackets, insulated gloves, and fitted balaclavas. The first was Hawk, tall and lean, with a long scar along his neck, visible above his collar, moving with the deliberate grace of a trained scout. Behind him came Boulder, a massive bald man with a thick chest, heavy boots, and the calm brutality of someone used to lifting bodies. Third was Flick, thin, quick, nervous energy in every motion, his sharp brown eyes scanning like an anxious predator. The last was Frost, older, mid-40s, square-jawed with streaks of silver in his beard, carrying an air of cold efficiency. Clearly their leader. Hawk swept a flashlight beam low, checking corners. Boulder took heavy steps towards the back, examining shelves. Flick ducked behind the counter, his gloved hands searching for movement. Frost monitored the center of the room, listening. Jim knew these patterns. They were not gang thugs. They were trained, quiet, disciplined. Rex waited under the counter, perfectly still, his amber eyes locked on Jim's silent cues. Jim positioned himself behind Hawk's blind spot. He moved like a shadow, one hand striking the man's throat in a precise chop that cut air and sound. Hawk collapsed into Jim's grip without a gasp. Jim lowered him gently to the floor and signaled Rex. Flick rounded the counter at the exact angle Jim expected. Rex exploded forward, silent as a missile, jaws clamping onto Flick's forearm with controlled precision. The man's eyes widened in muted shock as the dog yanked him off balance. Jim crossed the room in 2 steps, delivering a quick, hard elbow to Flick's temple, dropping him unconscious beside the counter. Boulder, sensing movement, turned too late. Jim slid behind him, hooking an arm around Boulder's neck and applying a chokehold with surgical pressure. The brute thrashed for a moment, boots scraping wood, before collapsing with a muffled thud. Less than 30 seconds had passed. Frost, the most experienced, reacted quickly and silently, raising a suppressed sidearm toward Jim. But Rex was faster. The dog leaped sideways, slamming into Frost's legs with brutal force. Frost fired once, an empty click. No round chambered. Jim grabbed Frost's wrist, twisting sharply until the gun fell. Frost swung a knife from his belt, slicing through the air. Jim caught his elbow, pivoted, and slammed the man's arm against the counter edge. The knife dropped. Jim shoved Frost to the floor and pressed a knee against his spine, zip-tying his wrists in one fast motion. 48 seconds had passed. The room fell utterly silent except for Rex's steady breathing. Jim dragged each unconscious intruder into the shop's center, placing them side by side. He stripped their radios, weapons, and gear, checking these with brisk expertise. The radios were encrypted military-grade devices, far beyond what petty criminals would use. Jim lifted Frost's headset and placed it on his own ear. Static hissed. Then a voice cut through, low, cold, and unmistakably authoritative. Team 1, status report. Jim didn't speak. The voice returned, sharper. Team 1, respond now. Jim recognized the tone immediately. It matched the description Nora had given him. Viktor Chernov's voice was smooth, but layered with venom. If you've secured the woman, say the word. We're moving to Phase 2 in 5 minutes. Jim's eyes narrowed. Viktor wasn't far. Not just controlling from a distance. He was nearby, close enough to observe real time, close enough to deploy Phase 2 himself. Rex stood beside Jim, tail low, ears pointed sharply towards the door, as if sensing someone still out there. Jim lowered the radio and listened again. Another voice crackled. Boss, drone feed still shows no movement. Shop looks quiet. Should we proceed? Viktor's calm response sent ice through Jim's chest. Proceed. I'm 2 blocks away. If Team 1 failed, I will finish this myself. Jim exhaled slowly. Viktor Chernov was already hunting them in person. Jim moved quickly now. He zip-tied the remaining men, disabled their weapons, and pulled their jackets to check for identifiers. Each wore the same brandless black gear, but Frost carried a small silver insignia, a minimalist wolf head. Jim pocketed it. Rex followed Jim to the window. Jim peered through the frosted glass into the snowy street. He couldn't see Viktor yet, but he felt it. The pressure of being watched. The cold outside wasn't just weather. It was the breath of a predator approaching. Jim lowered the blinds, grabbed the radio again, and replayed the last transmission, analyzing tone and cadence. The voice was unmistakably calm, too calm for someone uncertain. Viktor knew exactly what he was doing. Jim turned to Anya, who had been silently peering from the stairs, her amber eyes wide with fear but clarity. He whispered, Viktor is here. She swallowed hard, gripping the railing. Rex moved beside her, standing guard. Jim exhaled deeply, steel settling into his voice. We need to prepare for the next step. This isn't over. Outside, the snow fell heavier, as if Alaska itself braced for the storm about to break inside Kasiluk. The storm had quieted, but the cold grew sharper, turning Kasiluk's wooden houses into silhouettes rimmed with frost as shadows lengthened across the snow-covered street. Inside North Star Curios, Jim Walker felt the pressure of the night gathering like a fist around the town. Rex stood beside him, posture rigid, amber eyes fixed on the windows. Anya Petrov waited on the stairs, wrapped in a thick wool shawl, fear pulling her features tight. Jim watched the quiet darkness outside, sensing danger before it appeared. The kind of silence that follows a threat, not the one that precedes peace. He whispered to Rex, It's time, and the dog's ears pricked as the first pair of headlights cut through the swirling cold. Within minutes, more headlights joined the first. 6 black SUVs rolled down the road and halted with predatory precision before the shop. Inside the lead vehicle, Viktor Chernov sat in the back seat, his lean silhouette half lit by the glow of his tablet. His angular features looked carved from ice, gray-streaked hair combed back neatly, blue-gray eyes calm and calculating. He wore a heavy black coat lined with wolf fur at the collar, giving him the air of a powerful man who rarely lifted his own hands, but always made sure others did the lifting. He spoke into a radio with the measured tone of someone used to control. Positions. Team 2 cover the Marshal's car. Team 3 prepare incendiaries. No mistakes. Marshal Nora Hale's patrol car pulled onto the street seconds later. The moment her headlights hit the SUVs, automatic fire erupted from behind the vehicles. Nora ducked instantly, her sharp, dark eyes narrowing as windshield glass shattered. The gunmen firing into her car were masked, disciplined, and used tactical rifles fitted with suppressors that cut the gunfire into muted coughs. Nora yanked her partner, Officer Billings, a younger man with sandy hair and a nervous expression, down against the seats. She barked, "Call for backup now!" Billings trembled but obeyed. Bullets sliced through the hood of the cruiser, smoke rising into the cold air. Nora glimpsed the silhouette of Victor through the dark tint of his SUV. She recognized the posture of a man who believed he already owned the night. Inside North Star Curios, the gunfire collided with the walls like muffled thunder. Rex let out a deep, low growl, not loud, but vibrating with intent. Jim didn't waste a second. He grabbed his pack from under the counter, revealing 3 compact snow charges, small hand-built explosives he'd made earlier from military-grade materials he kept for emergencies. Each was designed not to kill, but to disorient with a blast of compressed snow and icy debris. He slipped them into a pouch, tightened the straps on his charcoal parka, and signaled Rex toward the back stairwell. "Up," he whispered, and Rex bolted up the narrow steps, claws cutting into old wood as Jim followed. The roof was a flat stretch of snow and ice, wind slicing across it like a blade. From up here, Jim had a full view of the SUVs and the men preparing Molotov cocktails behind them. 4 men wearing insulated tactical jackets and thick winter masks stuffed rags into glass bottles filled with accelerant. Flames from their lighters cast flickers of orange on their gloves. Jim saw Victor's SUV parked behind them, the man inside calmly watching the street through tinted glass, blue-gray eyes glowing faintly like a predator waiting for his prey to move. Jim whispered for Rex to stay low as he crawled toward the chimney stack, using it for cover. Jim pulled the first snow charge, pressed a button to arm it, and lobbed it toward the rearmost SUV. The explosion burst into a white-out cloud, snow erupting in every direction with a deep, muffled thump. The nearest gunman staggered backward, falling into the drifts, blinded and choking. One of them fired blindly upward, shots ringing off metal. Victor leaned forward in his seat, eyebrows lifting slightly in interest. "So you're up there," he murmured into the radio. "Team 3, adjust. He's on the roof." His calm tone made the moment more chilling. He had expected resistance. Maybe he even welcomed it. The men preparing Molotov cocktails scrambled to recover, some slipping on the freshly blasted snow. Jim used their confusion to throw the second snow charge. The blast hit the front tactical line, toppling 2 men into the snowbanks and causing one Molotov to slip from a glove and shatter on the pavement. Flames erupted instantly, licking upward in a bright burst. The firelight reflected across the icy road, turning the battlefield into a chaotic dance of orange and blue. Rex pressed close to Jim's leg, tense but steady, ready for any command. Jim reached for the third snow charge, knowing this one had to push them fully into disarray before they could regroup. Below, the wind shifted sharply, blowing from the east. The flames from the first Molotov bent sideways, straight toward 2 of Victor's own men. One shouted in panic, stepping back and slipping on ice. The blast of snow from Jim's third charge erupted at the exact moment, creating a roaring white cloud that mixed with the sideways flames. Sparks flew. A second Molotov slipped, hit the ground, and ignited a burning splash across the legs of another gunman's coat. Chaos erupted. Victor leaned forward again, calmly observing the disorder. His blue-gray eyes narrowed, not with fear, but with annoyance. His voice crackled over the radio. "If you cannot control the fire, you do not deserve to control anything. Contain it or fall back." The snowfall thickened rapidly, stirred by the blasts and the shifting wind. Jim took advantage. He slid down the sloped end of the roof, landing silently in the alley behind the shop. Rex jumped down beside him with practiced grace. Jim moved toward the rear of the nearest SUV, staying in the shadows. Several blinded gunmen stumbled across the road, shouting commands that clashed over the radio waves. The burning Molotovs cast long, wild shadows against the snowbanks, distorting the landscape. Jim disabled a gunman from behind with a quick chokehold, dragging him behind the SUV and zip-tying his wrists. Rex watched, ears up, ready for the next signal. Victor's calm voice echoed again from the radios. "Pull back, regroup. Someone took your night. I want eyes on the roof again. And find the dog. He's worth more than any of you." Jim recognized the shift. Victor wasn't retreating. He was recalculating. Jim motioned to Rex, and the dog pressed against his leg. The smell of burning fuel began to fade as the wind shifted once more, blowing smoke toward the far end of the street and away from the shop. The fire that threatened to engulf North Star Curios now worked against Victor's men instead. Jim looked up at the roofline, silhouetted against the smoke-filled sky. The night was turning in his favor, and Victor knew it. The calm voice on the radio said, "Prepare Phase 3, but the irritation beneath it revealed everything. This battle was slipping from his grip. The flames outside dimmed as the snowfall thickened, smothering burning patches on the street and casting swirling shadows across the walls of North Star Curios. Inside, Jim Walker moved through the back hallway with Rex at his side, both stepping carefully as smoke seeped through cracks in the wooden boards. The old shop creaked under the strain of the night's violence. Jim's instincts sharpened, sensing a shift in the rhythm of danger. Something changing, something approaching fast. Then, through the broken front window, red and blue lights cut across the icy haze. Marshal Nora Hale's convoy of reinforcements finally arrived, engines rumbling as armed officers spread out in formation. Jim exhaled once, steadying himself. The cavalry was here, but the fight wasn't over. Nora Hale was the first to step out of the lead vehicle. Her tall figure, wrapped in a Ranger-style winter jacket, cut through the wind like a blade. Her short, dark hair, streaked with gray, stuck to her forehead from exertion. The same intense, dark eyes she had when younger, eyes shaped by decades of winter storms, now scanned the chaos with a commander's sharpness. She raised her arm and shouted, "Move! Secure the perimeter! Watch for Chernov! He's here somewhere!" Officer Billings followed behind her with a rifle, his sandy hair matted from sweat, but determination replacing the fear he carried earlier. The officers fanned out while Nora advanced toward the shattered entrance of the shop. Inside, Viktor Chernov had already slipped away from the collapsing confrontation outside. The lean, wolf-like man moved through the aisles with unsettling calm, his angular face illuminated by flickering lamplight. His blue-gray eyes were cold and sharp, scanning every path for an exit. Smoke from outside fires seeped into the store, coating the air with a burnt, oily scent. Victor whispered into his radio, "Teams are down. I'm entering the structure. Finding an alternate route." The calmness in his voice cracked slightly, revealing strain beneath his controlled demeanor. He moved deeper into the shop, heading for the narrow wooden stairway leading to the upper level. Anya's living space. Jim spotted Victor's silhouette just as the man approached the stairway. The sight of the criminal mastermind inside the shop ignited a new surge of vigilance. Jim signaled Rex to stay low, then slipped from behind a shelf, boots silent on the wooden floor. Victor paused, sensing movement behind him. He turned his head slightly, catching only a glimpse through smoke, enough to recognize the rugged figure of Jim Walker. Jim's square jaw clenched, frost-dusted stubble illuminated by an orange flame reflection. He stepped into view, blocking the stairway. "It's over," Jim said evenly. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Nothing ends until I say it does." The final confrontation snapped into motion like a trap springing shut. Victor lunged first, faster than his age suggested, driving his shoulder toward Jim's ribs. Jim pivoted, letting the blow glance off, then pushed Victor back toward the stair railing. The smoke thickened, carrying the scent of burning oil from spilled Molotov residue near the entrance. The cramped stairway forced them into close-quarters combat, where Victor showed unexpected discipline, sharp elbows, controlled strikes, training that came from more than street brutality. Jim countered with efficient movements, honed from years as a SEAL, each strike measured and controlled. Their boots thudded against the wooden steps, shaking dust loose from the beams above. Victor grabbed the railing with one gloved hand and swung upward, kicking toward Jim's face. Jim blocked with his forearm, the impact jarring but manageable. Victor's coat shifted, revealing a slim tactical knife sheathed inside. Before he could reach for it, Jim drove him backward, slamming Victor against the wall hard enough to rattle the frames of old photographs hanging along the stair. Smoke curled around them, turning the edges of the world into a blurred gray haze. Victor snarled, "You don't understand who I am." Jim's voice was low, calm, unshaken. "I understand exactly who you chose to be." Rex barked sharply from below. One single sound, deep and commanding, signaling danger but also readiness. Jim stepped aside as Victor swung again. The blow left Victor briefly exposed, and Jim seized the moment. He swept Victor's leg, sending the man crashing backward onto the landing. Victor tried to rise, but Jim pinned his arm, twisting with controlled strength until the knife clattered from his grip. Rex bounded up 2 steps, stopping just short of Jim's reach, guarding with a low growl that vibrated through the wooden stairwell. Victor struggled once more, but the fight had drained from him. Jim tightened the zip tie around Victor's wrists, binding them firmly. As soon as Victor was immobilized, Nora Hale burst into the corridor with 2 officers. Her narrowed, dark eyes flashed between Jim, the restrained Victor, and the smoky room. "Walker, you're not on the payroll," she said, breathless. "But damn, you saved us a war." Jim nodded once. Rex moved to stand between Jim and Victor, posture rigid, muscles taut, amber eyes fixed on the man like a sentinel. Nora knelt beside Victor, her expression shifting from relief to steely focus. "Victor Chernoff," she said, "you're done." Victor spat blood onto the floor but smirked faintly. "You think you know what I've built?" Nora leaned closer. "I know everything now." One of the officers behind her held up a small, rugged, waterproof hard drive they had recovered from the pocket of Frost earlier, labeled with a silver wolf insignia. Nora took it carefully, her face illuminated by the faint LED glow from the drive. "This contains shipment logs, bribe trails, offshore transfers, everything," she murmured. Victor's smirk faded. Jim felt Rex relax slightly, sensing the shift in the room's energy. Outside, the storm winds calmed, the sounds of gunfire replaced by the crackle of extinguishing flames and the distant hum of backup vehicles moving into position. Nora ordered, "Secure the building. Move him out." Jim stepped back, watching officers lift Victor to his feet. Rex stayed beside Jim, head level, controlled breathing indicating the dog understood the danger had passed. Anya appeared at the top of the stairs, relief washing across her silver-braided features as she saw Jim unharmed. Nora turned to Jim. "This ends tonight, thanks to you." Jim looked at the smoke-filled stairway, the cracked railing, the exhausted officers, and finally Victor being escorted away. "It ends because people stopped being afraid," he said. Rex pressed gently against Jim's leg, a silent confirmation that the fight, for now, was over. The night finally loosened its grip on Kasaluk as the first hints of morning crept across the frozen horizon. Pale silver light spilled across the rooftops, turning icicles into thin glowing spears that shimmered with each cold gust. Smoke rose faintly from the street where the night's chaos had played out, but the air now carried a calmer tone, one shaped by relief rather than fear. Jim Walker stood at the entrance of North Star Curios, with Rex at his side, taking in the quiet moment before the town awakened fully. The sharp-edged cold that usually bit into skin felt softer now, tempered by the knowledge that the threat which had haunted Kasaluk had finally been contained. Rex's tail swayed lightly, sensing his handlers shift from vigilance to calm. Within an hour, the first residents of Kasaluk began arriving, bundled in thick parkas and wool scarves, their breaths forming clouds that drifted together in the soft dawn air. Word had spread quickly. People came not out of curiosity, but out of solidarity. Among them was old Merle Thompson, a retired carpenter in his 70s, with a beard that resembled a snow-laden pine branch. His wiry frame carried a quiet stubbornness built from decades spent battling Alaskan winters. He stepped forward with a determined gaze and said, "Anya, I'm building you new shelves, no argument." Behind him, the Dawson brothers, two burly fishermen known for their booming laughter and identical red beards, carried wooden planks across their shoulders. Their cheeks flushed from the cold, they greeted Anya with warm smiles. "You kept this town alive with books," one of them said. "Time for us to return the favor." Inside the shop, sunlight pierced through broken windows, illuminating remnants of overturned shelves, scattered antiques, and the faint scent of burnt oil from the Molotovs thrown the night before. Anya Petrov, her silver braid resting gently across her shoulder, moved slowly among the debris with a soft, grateful smile. Her amber eyes glistened under the light, showing exhaustion but also hope. She touched the cracked glass of a display case and whispered, "I thought this place would be lost." Jim stood beside her, offering steady reassurance. "You're not alone. Not anymore." Rex brushed against her leg, prompting her to laugh softly, a sound that seemed to lift a piece of the lingering darkness from the room. Marshal Nora Hale entered the shop as the townspeople continued bringing in supplies. Her ranger-style jacket was smudged with ash, her short dark hair sticking to her temple, but her eyes burned with determination. She approached Jim and handed him a sealed evidence bag containing the silver wolf insignia hard drive recovered from Victor's men. "We've confirmed everything," she said. "The files trace smuggling routes, payoff ledgers, intimidation orders. It's over. Victor's operation across the coast is going down like rotten timber." Officer Billings stepped in behind her, holding a clipboard with arrest logs. His sandy hair was disheveled, but pride brightened his face. "Every man who came in last night is in custody. Federal teams are on their way." Outside, more townspeople gathered, forming a line to help remove debris, hammer new boards, and sweep broken glass from the icy street. Even young children bundled in puffy coats carried small boxes of donated books or held nails for Merle Thompson as he crafted the new shelves. Among the helpers was Lila Foster, the town baker, a tall, thin woman in her late 50s with rosy cheeks and curly gray hair tucked under a wool hat. She carried 2 large trays of warm pastries, steam rising into the cold morning air. "Nobody works on an empty stomach," she declared, handing cinnamon rolls to everyone, including Rex, who received a special small one baked without sugar. Lila winked at Jim. "He deserves it more than any of us." The rebuilding took on the rhythm of a small festival, with laughter mixing with the pounding of hammers and the scent of warm pastries drifting across the freshly swept snow. Jim worked alongside the Dawson brothers, lifting heavy beams into place. His rugged face softened in the daylight, showing the quiet satisfaction of a man who finally saw peace return to a place he had grown to care for deeply. Rex moved between workers, offering his presence like a silent guardian, occasionally nudging someone gently as if checking their emotional state. Anya supervised the placement of the new shelves, her posture straighter than it had been in days, confidence restored by the town's overwhelming support. Nora Hale stood outside with a group of officers, discussing transport arrangements for Viktor Chernoff and his remaining associates. The criminal mastermind was held in a secure vehicle, his wrists bound, his blue-gray eyes narrowed not with defiance, but with dawning realization that his empire had finally collapsed. Nora approached Jim again, her tone softer now. "You didn't just save Anya and this store. You restored something this town lost a long time ago. Its confidence." Jim shook his head. "I didn't do it alone." Nora nodded, glancing at Rex. "No, you had help." The dog barked once, tail wagging proudly, prompting both adults to laugh in shared relief. As the repairs neared completion, the morning sun broke through dense clouds, bathing Kasseluk in silver-gold light. The icy landscape sparkled like scattered diamonds. The new shelves stood solidly in place, crafted from rich pine wood, their smooth surfaces reflecting the soft glimmer of dawn. Anya placed the first restored book on the top shelf, her hands trembling gently. "This shop is more than a store," she said. "It's memory, history, and hope." Jim nodded quietly, feeling the weight of her words settle inside him. Rex laid down near the entrance, paws crossed, watching the street with calm vigilance, as though standing guard over the newly restored peace. Near midday, the townspeople gathered outside the shop's front entrance. Children held handmade signs that read, "Thank you, Jim and Rex," decorated with painted paw prints and wooden stars. Anya stood beside Jim, her silver braid shimmering in the brightening light. She reached for his hand, offering a heartfelt squeeze. Jim, normally stoic, allowed a faint smile to reach his eyes. The cold wind brushed across his face, carrying with it the sound of hammers slowing, laughter echoing, and the steady heartbeat of a community renewed. Rex leaned gently into Jim's leg, sensing the emotional shift in the moment. Together, the three of them stepped just outside the shop, standing beneath the soft radiance of the Alaskan morning. Snowflakes drifted slowly around them like falling feathers, catching the silver light and scattering it across the street. The quiet beauty of the moment spoke louder than any celebration. Jim looked at Anya, then at Rex, and then at the crowd gathered with grateful, hopeful faces. In this fragile but powerful moment, he realized something profound. Courage was contagious. It traveled from one heart to another, igniting unity where fear once lived. Sometimes, miracles don't arrive with thunder or flashes of light. They come quietly, through the courage of ordinary people and the protection God places over them. In the silent snow of Alaska, Jim, Rex, and Anya reminded us that faith isn't just something we carry. It's something that carries us. Just like this small town stood together against darkness, you too can overcome the struggles in your own life. No matter how cold the world feels, God can send light through people you never expected. Maybe even through you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who may need a reminder of hope. Leave a comment telling us which moment strengthened your faith, and subscribe so you never miss these powerful stories of courage, family, and divine protection. Before you go, we want to pray a blessing over you. May God watch over your home, guide your steps, and surround your family with His shield of peace. If you receive this blessing, type Amen in the comments. And may the Lord bless you, today, tomorrow, and always.